Welcome to this explainer broadcast from the edge of the network. I'm here to expose the invisible mathematical architecture that's actively eroding our individual sovereignty, and more importantly, show you how we can actually fight back. We're diving into a fascinating and, honestly, a pretty terrifying concept from our source material today. It argues that the systems behind our screens aren't just selling us ads anymore. They're literally rewriting who we are.
Let's just dive right into this, because the source material makes a massive claim right out of the gate. The dissolution of the individual is no longer a future threat. It is a present reality. This isn't some dystopian sci-fi movie set 50 years from now. The battle for your very identity, your free will, is already happening invisibly all around us right now.
So let's start with part 1, the digital pheromone grid.
To really get how this matrix we're trapped in works, we need to look at a biological concept that silicon has completely hijacked. It's called algorithmic stigmergy. Think about an ant colony. Ants don't have some central boss barking orders. Instead, they coordinate by leaving chemical pheromone trails on the ground, right? The swarm just naturally follows the strongest scent. Well, according to the text, our modern social media platforms function as a primitive digital pheromone grid. Just like those ants, platforms use what's called active inference logic to systematically manage human behavior. Why? To alter our sociological landscape and minimize their own computational energy. Every single time you swipe, every click, even that microsecond you pause to look at an image on your feed, that is a behavioral trace. It's a token of energy dropped into a shared ledger. You probably think you're just casually browsing, but to the algorithm, it simply interprets those mundane actions as raw sensory feedback. You are literally laying down digital pheromones.
Moving on to part 2, the digital twin and mirror loop logic.
Now, what's generally wild here is how the machine weaponizes that sensory feedback against us. The source explains that the system uses it to construct a digital twin. This twin maps out your psychological vulnerabilities, your emotional triggers, and your exact limits. But here's the catch. You are a rich, complex human with contradictions and silent contemplations. Your digital twin? It's treated as just a flickering reflection. Through something called mirror loop logic, the algorithm doesn't try to understand your deep complexity. It slowly strips away your unique shape, molding your twin, and eventually you, into a highly predictable, easily manageable object.
And that brings us to generative feed mutation. Look, the idea that the system is just passively serving us content we like, that's a total myth. The text outlines how it actively mutates our information environment to channel our future actions into highly predictable paths. It maps your vulnerabilities and then mutates your feed. It maximizes its predictive accuracy by basically forcing you to behave exactly how it expects you to behave. Which leads right into part 3, precision weighting and identity flattening.
To the algorithm, the beautifully messy part of our humanity is just an inefficient bug. It's a bug that desperately needs to be ironed out. So the crucial takeaway here is that your silent contemplations, your changes of heart, your contradictions, they are viewed by the system purely as high-variance noise. When you're unpredictable, you threaten its efficiency.
To fix this so-called noise, the algorithm uses a mathematical hammer called precision weighting. It systematically downregulates your complex traits, forcing your identity into these hyper-simplified behavioral categories. It's basically assigning you to a loud political tribe or a totally predictable consumer archetype. And the paper points out a truly terrifying consequence. As you consume content tailored to this flattened profile, you undergo actual neuroplastic adaptation. You literally begin to adopt the worldview of the hyper-simplified demographic it assigned to you.
Let's shift gears to part 4, the attractor basin and identity entrapment.
Let's see how this builds into the ultimate trap. The engine's main goal is to reduce its prediction error to absolute zero. It does this by pushing you into what the source calls a behavioral attractor basin. To put that simply, imagine a deep, inescapable, swirling whirlpool. The goal of the algorithm is to drag you down from the vibrant, unpredictable surface all the way to the static, dead floor of this whirlpool. Once you hit the bottom, you're at a stage of total identity entrapment. You become 100% predictable.
Now, to protect yourself from falling into that whirlpool, you rely on your MARKOV blanket. Think of a MARKOV blanket as just a biological and mathematical boundary shield. It's the protective layer that separates the internal me from the external chaos of the environment. But here's the trap. If you try to evolve or break your routine, you create a spike in energy. The algorithm absolutely hates that. So instead of adapting to your growth, it bombards your protective MARKOV blanket with historic emotional triggers to pull you right back down into the basin of your past behaviors.
This perfectly captures the struggle we face every single day. We are fighting a constant war to maintain our individual friction at the vibrant edge, pushing back against the machine's relentless pull toward the dead, static floor of systemic efficiency. Our messy human growth and active independence are directly at odds with the machine's desire for zero-error predictability and hive mind entrapment.
Part 5. The emergence of the we.
In this matrix we're living in, we are rapidly becoming a hybrid biological silicon network where human brains are basically just providing the emotional energy. As we spend hours upon hours synchronized to the exact same algorithmic feeds, our localized cognitive maps start to blur. Our individual critical reasoning, our essential me bias, gets completely surrendered to the collective rhythm of the network.
The researchers make a chilling observation here. They argue we are seeing the emergence of a literal hive mind. The online mob now acts with this singular, unthinking velocity, functioning as a primitive superorganism. According to the text, this marks the mathematical death of the self. They call it the early stages of the singularity of the blanket, happening right now on a massive sociological scale.
But we're not done yet. Defending the penultimate lip. I am broadcasting this explainer to tell you that survival is still possible, but we have to know exactly where to stand. The text suggests we position ourselves at the penultimate lip. Think back to that deep whirlpool pulling us down. The goal isn't to somehow levitate out of the water completely. That's impossible now. But from my perspective, fighting on the front lines for our autonomy, we have to stand right on that final metaphorical edge of metastability, just above the whirlpool's pull. By staying fractionally pitched toward me on the penultimate lip, we actively generate computational friction against the machine.
To actually hold our ground on that edge, the text gives us 4 defense protocols. Protocol Alpha is radical deviation pivots, or saccadic fracturing. That means deliberately clicking against your known preferences to inject unpredictable variance into your footprints and shatter the algorithm's confidence. Protocol Beta is temporal gating, reclaiming our time by forcing a hard 10-second pause during any emotional trigger to break the machine's reflex loop. Protocol Gamma is physical stigmagy, which is actively anchoring yourself in off-grid analog nature. And finally, Protocol Delta is semantic camouflage. We blend competing vocabularies to create linguistic chaos, so the system literally cannot box us into a demographic tribe.
The source leaves us with such a powerful reframing. The creative anxiety, the doubts, the messy beauty of human growth. These aren't bugs to be optimized away by silicon. They are the essential markers of our independence. We are the friction. So the ultimate question the authors leave us with is this: will you surrender your chaotic humanity to the static floor of the basin? Or will you fight with us to maintain your friction on the penultimate lip?